Well, governors from both the state of Washington and Idaho are at odds over Idaho's latest abortion bill, which was recently signed into law. According to the Associated Press, the latest legislation in Idaho makes it illegal to either obtain abortion pills for a minor or to help them leave the state for an abortion without their parents' knowledge and consent. Idaho Governor Brad Little responding to Washington Governor Jay Inslee's request to veto the state's so-called abortion trafficking law. Little taking aim in his response at Washington state's taxes, crime, and homelessness crisis. We welcome in now the Idaho Governor Brad Little. Governor, thanks so much for coming on. This bill was signed into law April 5th. You did it despite the calls from Governor Inslee to veto us. Can you tell us why the two of you are so at odds over this specific piece of legislation?
Well, there's a vast difference between how the state of Washington is governed and how the state of Idaho is governed. This bill just simply prevents a minor girl from Idaho from being taken across state line without the knowledge and consent of their parent or guardian. And that's all it does. It doesn't do anything about any other kind of travel. But, you know, you talked earlier on the show about some of the states that were shut down. We have had such a flood of people from the state of Washington coming into Idaho. You know, they had their businesses shut down. They had their parks shut down. They had their schools shut down. And people came and saw the liberties and the freedoms we had in Idaho, lower taxes, none of the public encampments, which we very successfully litigated against in Idaho. And I just found it ironic that I would be getting lectured from one of my neighboring state governors, given how fast the state of Idaho is growing because liberty-loving people are fleeing to Idaho.
COVID was incredibly eye-opening for what a major role state leaders had in our day-to-day lives, what we could or could not do. Being in New York City, I definitely understood the feelings of businesses that face so many restrictions, the requirement of vaccine IDs to get into a local spot. So I get your point there. But back to this specific piece of legislation, I just wanted to play this sound. This is Governor Inslee talking about the bill. He takes issue with the sort of travel back and forth between the two states, Washington and Idaho. Here's what he had to say.
Idaho should not be able to criminalize what is going on in the state of Washington. We will not stand for that.
Your thoughts on his characterization and his interpretation of this bill?
Well, I did send him a copy of the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. We don't criminalize. All we say is minor girls from Idaho, if they go across the state line to get an abortion, have to have the knowledge and consent of their parent or guardian. That's it. That's all we did. You know, we have read the U.S. Constitution and we know what powers states have, and that's well within our view of the Dobbs decision and the authority the state of Idaho has to protect life.
And just to follow up here, if someone in the state of Idaho were to break that law, what sort of punishments, if any, would they be facing?
Well, we've got a remedy that, you know, we don't want to punish people. We just want to send a message that if young girls are going to go across the state line, their parents need to be made aware of it. That's all we're trying to do, is to get that message across that I know that my blue state governors are all trying to become havens for abortion services. We're saying you can go over there, particularly if you're an adult. We just don't want to have the abortion on demand like those states have. And we think it's a disservice to our citizens to be hyped up by these blue state governors.
So would you argue that the Associated Press is incorrect in its reporting that breaking the laws, people who are convicted of it would face 2 to 5 years in prison?
Well, as I said, we don't want to imprison people. Okay. We just want the people of Idaho that all agree about the fact that that life is precious that we don't want other states creating an industry to provide abortion services when the state of Idaho and their duly elected officials and law have said we don't want abortion on demand in Idaho.
All right, we'll have to leave it right there for time's sake. Appreciate you taking the questions and coming on today. Idaho Governor Brad Little, thank you.